Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information and no conspiracy theories. On tonight's show. On previous shows we have looked into United Nations Agenda 21, also known as Sustainable Development. This week we'll be looking at the bigger picture of the Smart Green genocide. We've covered this in previous shows, and also what this means in your local area. With the announcement of Mini Holland areas being introduced, and having seen this in action, we're going to look into what the bigger picture behind the fake green agenda really is. This is from our article, The Big Society Equals Evil Deviant Subversion, on windowsontheworld.net. In what is now known as your community, and under the banner of the big society, change agents are implementing social change. They will not tell you directly what that change is. The reason for this is that they are implementing change that no one would want. This change is loss of all individual rights over collective consensus, which means everyone agrees as they have no choice. All this is under a fake green agenda known as Agenda 21, or to give it its nice fluffy fake green name, Sustainable Development. This is being implemented by all UK councils. We have this on the website and the documents are all there, linked to the article. Now, there's a government document in the article which describes how it will be implemented by force, or by consensus, which means obviously that we don't agree, we are made to agree. Here's a quote from the document. The impact of reductions will be one of anger, the degree of which is yet to be realised. As the reality of reduced services hit, people will rise to action. The key to big society succeeding is to galvanise this energy. This means trained community organisers, stakeholders and chosen groups will implement the loss of all rights. They're already in place and they're doing this in your local community. This article will expose how to spot these subversives. So let's remember that Agenda 21 is a worldwide programme implemented by the United Nations. This is where the change agents, aka community organisers or social entrepreneurs, come in. Now, Windows on the World did a whole show on change agents and Agenda 21. You can find that on our windowsontheworld.net site. I've also done a video with Bill Coombs of videos from the underground on how these groups are filtering down through the Tavistock Institute and its social policy organisations. Okay, we're at number 30 Tabernacle Street, EC2A, London, and this is the head of the British Psychological Society, the Tavistock Institute, Academy of Social Sciences and the Political Studies Association of the United Kingdom. Now, all of these associations are driving policy. It's very interesting that we've got the British Psychological Society at the top there. They now seem to have all come under one umbrella. So these are basically institutions that are driving social change and social policy. In other words, how things are filtering down into the public. What we're doing here is we're looking at the way that limited choices are given, and those choices are then acted out by change agents within society. So basically driving social policy has been going on a long time, but it is a science now. For instance, when we were at Occupy, which was actually taken down by change agents very quickly, Occupy St Paul's a few years ago, the Tavistock Institute were doing social dreaming experiments there. Now, social dreaming is a way of telling people what their aspirations really are, but it's also analysing the psychology of what's going on in people's minds. So they're creating the psychology and they're bringing it down through these organisations, a number of which we're going to look at later. Some are funded by the United Nations and are coming through local authorities. So basically this implementation of change is is quite easy to follow, but what they're not telling you is what the change is. Now the change is the big society. So these institutions are very big on programming, social policy. They have several think tanks that link under this to the government, and these are driving this thing called social change. So really what we're looking at is the implementation of a communitarian, which actually really is communism. Sometimes it doesn't trip off the tongue, but the communitarian agenda of the British government, and indeed the European Union, is where these social changes are being implemented through organisations such as this. So you've got the British Psychological Society, the Tavistock Institute, the Academy of Social Sciences, Political Studies Association of the United Kingdom. Now, we did a show recently where we actually phoned up the Tavistock Institute to ask them about their social dreaming experiment, and they actually denied that they'd participated or instigated any form of social dreaming. Now, it was still on their website and they had the screen capture, so either these people don't know what they're doing, or they deny a lot of what's happening. So that's it. Here we are, the centre of global mind control, and here's the policy that's driving it. We're outside a place called Unlimited in Whitecross Street in London EC1, and we're just down the road from the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, and this place ties in very much with that, because what they're doing here is creating social entrepreneurs. It all looks very innocent on the outside, but what they're doing is they're programming their own facilitators to go into communities to implement the change that we've been talking about, which is the communitarian big agenda, the big society. We've just been talking to two ladies down here who are having agitators put into places where they're living, and these people are the same people, the facilitators, who are going to be implementing this social change. So they're actually creating a divide and rule society. They're targeting people who they want to agitate, and then they're coming in with a solution. So basically the Agenda 21 big society is all about total surveillance and control of minds, and it's worth looking into this organisation Unlimited. There's another one called Locality, who are again putting facilitators into your local community, and this is happening all over Britain. 10,000 have just been trained to go in. They're doing it through the local authorities and the United Nations. So this big society is using what's called Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, which is basically nothing's off the charts. It's worth looking at that, because these professional facilitators and agitators are using deviant tactics to subvert what decent people would call society. So Unlimited are training a certain amount of social entrepreneurs, but what sort of social entrepreneurs are they actually training, and what is a social entrepreneur? I would call a social entrepreneur someone who set up a small business and employed local people. I don't think that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about creating a network which filters down into Sustainable Development Agenda 21. So people are being programmed into that agenda. So when they're saying social entrepreneurs, we have to actually question what they mean by a social entrepreneur. On the outside it looks very fluffy, but when you do your research and your homework, you've got Unlimited, Regenerate and Locality are using subversive techniques to create the big society. thebigsociety.org in this country, Unlimited and Locality can be found on the internet, and the third sector, which is what these groups are part of, are also stating in their own documentation that in order to bring communities together, there is often a need for a common enemy, and we're finding more and more people are becoming the common enemy. So look into the big society, communitarian agenda, and how it's affecting your local community, because this is a worldwide program.
Now, this change that they talk of is no-choice fascism and loss of all rights, including private travel, cars and all property. The escalating fake green taxation and global warming agenda is intricately woven in with mass depopulation. This is all in their documents, in the Agenda 21 documents. Mass depopulation is the goal. This includes rural areas being made impossible to live in, and hive cities with sustainable housing, which means flats which are overlooked by the police and local authority with constant surveillance. Now, the police are working with local authorities and they're sharing information and intelligence, and they are now harassing citizens, and we've actually covered this on the show. These are part-owned, these flats, which means that you are a tenant and you can be evicted at any time. Again, you're not allowed to own anything under Agenda 21. Private property is to be abolished. So let's look at how this big society change is implemented. A change agent. What is a change agent? Well, this is someone who implements an agenda through an already predicted course of action. A facilitator. Here's something else you hear quite a lot. Trained facilitators will be taking over your council meetings. Again, we covered this in the Smart Green Genocide with Deborah Tavares, who we'll be hearing from later in the show. Now, a facilitator is a trained change agent or social entrepreneur or community organizer whose job is to gain consensus. They're there to make you agree on an already predicted outcome. So it's made to look as though you have some kind of democratic participation in this process. This means offering limited choices and steering the victims, yes, we are their victims, to their intended outcome. They are trained in neuro-linguistic programming and psychological subversion. They are also deeply programmed and let nothing stand in their way. They use Saul Alinsky rules for radicals, which means anything goes and anyone who disagrees is targeted and neutralised by others working with the facilitator. We covered this in our film The Puppet Masters of Occupy and Inside Occupy in the Bank of Ideas, which can be found on windowsontheworld.net. Consensus. Let's look at what consensus is. The agenda is already set. The public are steered towards the outcome. Limited choices are given. For instance, the facilitator will say, would you like Coke or Pepsi? And the victim, which is us, would say, I don't like soft drinks. The facilitator would then say, well, we may go into other choices in the future, but for the purpose of focusing on today's agenda, would you like Coke or Pepsi? Now, if you take it any further, other people will start shouting you down or call you disruptive, and then they bring out dragons, people who are known as dragons or co-facilitators, to join in and accuse you of being disruptive and saying that you're taking up too much time. This was exposed by Deborah Tavares at a public meeting. The privatisation of wells in California, exposed on the Smart Green Genocide. So, who are they, these change agents? They're also known as social entrepreneurs and community interest groups. The network is vast, but at the top is Unlimited, that's UN Limited, whose front window propaganda is helping social entrepreneurs. This is just a front for big society change agents, masquerading as community interest groups and companies. Only those groups who are already part of the agenda are chosen. Yes, it is a mafia-style operation. The other organisations in this huge spider's web of subversion are Locality, Citizens UK, Intentionality, and many more. There are lots and lots of these organisations, all interlinked, and they're all funded by the UN, and they are nothing to do with community interest groups, which is what they say they are. They're not interested in the community as we know it. They're into implementing their change, which is Agenda 21, loss of all property rights, private transport, and hive cities which are sustainable. As we stated, the big society change is loss of all rights, including property and private transport. This is being achieved through the fake green propaganda, which will take control of all assets on the planet, including food and water. Yes, food and water are assets, and they are to be controlled. They're already creating massive water shortages, and this has been stated by people in California. The collection of water by private individuals is being made illegal as corporations take over the water supply. This is being implemented by privatization with consent from all governments through the United Nations. Every council in the United Kingdom signed up for this in the year 2000, so how come you have not been told? The answer is simple. If the public knew about the real agenda behind Agenda 21, they would realise they do not have any form of constitutional governance. This implementation is being done through deception and fake green propaganda. Now, Agenda 21 is, according to that document, a programme of actions that was agreed at the United Nations Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, endorsed by the government, every council has to produce a local Agenda 21 or LA21 strategy by the end of the year 2000. The LA21 strategy is a local action plan which shows how the council will work with its communities towards environmentally friendly sustainable development. Now this can be seen most recently in so-called Mini Holland projects being rolled out in London. With the announcement of Mini Holland areas being introduced in London, and having seen this in action, we're going to look into what the bigger picture behind this fake green agenda really is. Here's a Waltham Forest Council document creating a Mini Holland in Waltham Forest. Let's hear what they've got to say, having witnessed the traffic chaos that's been caused by closing off many roads totally unnecessarily on the back of a cycling plan to get everybody cycling. Well, if they wanted cycle lanes, it's strange that they're already there. Cycle lanes have been there for many years now. Also, there are cycling routes through Waltham Forest Village where this proposed scheme is going to take place, and the experiment was done a few weeks ago. Now, there are cycling routes through Walthamstow Village, there are cycle lanes, and there are designated cycle tracks already in place. So let's be clear about this. This is not about cycling. Cycling groups have been co-opted, and eco fascists have basically been brought in to enforce this agenda and and be militant about it, really, which is what they're doing, because somebody up there was questioning this when they were trying to put together a petition in favour of this so-called Mini Holland, and they were shouted down, and it was stated that they didn't want change. Now, this is by a change agent, you see, the ones we've been talking about, and these people spout change, but they will never tell you what the change is. For instance, Chris Robbins, leader of Waltham Forest Council, was approached by members of the public about a development where a tower block was put up of new flats which vastly overlooked property that was already there and got in the way of local businesses. And Chris Robbins said this is just the sort of change we need. Yes, it's just the sort of change that's being implemented in boroughs like Waltham Forest. Obviously it's going all over the country, by architects for sustainable development who are involved with local change agent groups, and these change agent groups are run by Unlimited and Intentionality. They're masquerading as community hubs or community interest groups, and they are working in the voluntary or third sector, as we're exposed in the Big Society Unveiled on Windows on the World. So let's see what Waltham Forest have to say about their Mini Holland. Waltham Forest has been successful in its bid to Transport for London for £30 million to fund a Mini Holland cycling programme to radically improve the borough's cycling infrastructure and support a step change in the numbers of people choosing to cycle. Well, we know that's a lie. It has nothing to do with cycling. What are we trying to achieve? Mini Holland's key aims. We want to make cycling an enjoyable, safe and easy way of getting around. Not just for people who already cycle, but for people who might currently be put off from cycling because of safety concerns. Mini Holland will improve cycling conditions by making routes safer, but will also benefit motorists. I don't see how it's going to benefit motorists, as they won't be able to drive in these areas. These areas are being totally closed off for cars, and we are having parking restrictions put in everywhere in the borough. So along with the 20-mile-per-hour zones and the road humps everywhere, they are not helping motorists. They do not intend to help motorists. It will be a fortune to buy one of these parking permits, and anyone with a car which is something above 900 cc's will have to pay a fortune for their parking permit, eventually won't be able to afford it. This will put self-employed people out of business, which is the plan under Agenda 21, even though these people are saying that they want to encourage local entrepreneurship. No, the local entrepreneurship they want to encourage are the change agents or the social entrepreneurs brought in by Unlimited, Locality, Citizens UK and many, many other of these organisations who are training change agents, facilitators and community organisers to take over your community. It goes on to say, we want to ensure the scheme benefits the whole community, not just cyclists. So there we go, we had the double drop here. We've gone about cycling and they've cleverly now saying it's not just for cyclists. Well, it's not really for cyclists at all, actually. This is just propaganda. It says town centre spaces will be improved, providing areas for pedestrians so that rat runs are a thing of the past and parents and children feel safer on local roads. Well, this is nonsense, because the rat runs that they're talking about are major arterial routes. The main route through Walthamstow village was closed off, meaning that traffic was being diverted up a very, very busy road, creating absolute chaos. And they had wardens there that were with these roads that were closed off. And when I was talking to one of the wardens, he was saying that this was all being implemented obviously by Transport for London, but he was stating that the guy in charge at Transport for London had already stated that the scheme was actually upheld by 65% of the residents, which was untrue at the time, so that's another consensus. So they're paying people in Transport for London to gain consensus, which means, well, everyone agrees, don't they? Now, in a proper local survey, it was stated that it was 65-35 against this scheme. So it says here that by reducing traffic congestion in some areas, the scheme will ease parking pressure, reduce pollution and noise levels and create a greener environment for residents to enjoy. Well, it won't ease parking pressures because it will increase parking pressures, because people who have to be in the area, people who have to drive in the area, will not be able to park. So that's an absolute lie. Now, when I actually phoned up the council a few years ago about these parking permits, the woman who was the officer in charge of the planning for resident parking stated that a car of 900 cc's would be very cheap, a very cheap parking permit. It wasn't very much money at the time, but obviously we know these things go up incrementally as they try and get people off the road. Well, she was stating that 900 cc's was a car. I stated, actually, it's not a car. That sounds more like a moped. So what they're doing is they're going to make it impossible for larger vehicles to be parked in suburban and urban roads in the borough, which means wiping out the self-employed, who are already pretty much on their knees as it is. So it says here, local businesses will be involved local businesses will be involved where possible in the scheme, helping to support the local economy, and the borough as a whole will be more attractive for residents and visitors. Another lie. Local businesses were not consulted about this. They will never be consulted about this. The only so-called local businesses will be the stakeholder groups of the change agent companies set up through Unlimited and Locality. These organisations, or mainly actually voluntary third sector organisations. They use the voluntary sector a lot because it sounds very fluffy and everyone gets involved. They're always looking for volunteers, but when you go onto their site and see what a volunteer is somebody who's mentored and changed. So the volunteer has to be somebody who fits their profile of a United Nations Agenda 21 drone. We want to ensure the borough's town centres are better connected via cycling routes and improve the way in which we're connected to our neighbouring boroughs so that it's easier to get from A to B by bike. Yes, easier to get from A to B by bike, but impossible by any other means apart from walking. We want to use the scheme to increase cycling amongst residents, not just those who already cycle. We've already said that. They're repeating themselves in this document now. Getting more residents to jump on a bike will improve health and fitness levels in the borough. All very fluffy, all very green, all an absolute lie. It would create a more pleasant environment for everyone. With that, we recognise that people need to feel confident cycling. So in addition to making routes safer, we will offer a range of activities to encourage that confidence. Again, a range of activities by change agents and these radical eco-green fascists who've been recruited
to do the dirty work of the local authorities by persuading the local population that they're not being green enough and to think about their children and the pollution. Well, if they really want to think about their children, what sort of society are we going to live in under constant surveillance with mass depopulation and an agenda to wipe out any form of real entrepreneurship by these so-called social entrepreneurs who are taking away every single right, including private transport and private property, through United Nations Agenda 21?
Yeah, well, what's happened basically, I mean, the EU is a good example to start with, because we did EU law in 1982, and back then it was incredibly restrictive. There were directives which were literally that, they were directives, they weren't compulsory. You couldn't change the criminal law in a country. Everything was pretty much, I won't say democratic, but it was optional. There were many things which were it was like a nice little gentleman's club where we'll agree to do that, it's good. And then it got nasty because we got Maastricht, and then it became compulsory, and then we got Lisbon. And what it basically is it went from the European Community, European Economic Community, and now it's just the Union. It's a federal thing. It's like America, but the thing is, nearly all the law is made by the European Commission and not by the Parliament. They're not elected. They can make a lot of their stuff in secret, and they get 10 or 12 year terms. They're civil servants, they're not politicians, and they are making these laws which are now completely binding, completely compulsory, and the UN is telling them what to do. So you've got a layer and a layer. Now, if I just get this in now so that we know about it, you can't have a reason for something without a result. Now, the reason is global warming, and the result is the excuse, oh, well, what about India and China and everyone? They're not going to reduce their emissions, even if the whole EU do. So the excuse for having the EU on that front was that you can't trust the countries on their own to do the right thing, so you must be dictated to as a union. So that's the EU. America is the same. They're a federal country. Their Congress is supposed to be democratic. And then we discover there's something called an executive order. So Mr. Obama, within weeks of arriving, got this executive order. He used the Clean Air Act and the Environmental Protection Agency, and he said something which I think I can safely say this is a lie. Carbon dioxide is a pollutant. We'd be dead without it. These trees, all this greenery wouldn't exist without carbon dioxide. The carbon cycle means it's absolutely essential to have a minimum amount of carbon dioxide for every bit of life on Earth except anaerobic bacteria to exist. So Obama is based his whole thing on the lie. He knew that under the previous administration, Congress would never accept a carbon tax. So he's done it through the back door, and he's now got 2.5 years to do it there. And under ICLEI, the local government, countries, over 200 countries in the world, are implementing these things so slowly and gradually we won't notice until it's happened. Now, the next thing is, as far as organisation is concerned, is the carbon tax. They've already got plans. It's all written down, again, on the internet, published, documented. It was even in The Guardian, believe it or not. You wouldn't think they would do it, but they did. It's going to be a world tax on carbon, because they're saying that you can't trust even the third world countries to do anything about it. They always, try and get their own deals in all the government conferences they have every few months, and waste all our money doing it. So we're going to have a world carbon tax. Who's going to administer it? The UN. You can't have a world carbon tax in the UN without a higher level of law than national law and union law. And once you've got that, of course, it's like having a 5p charge for plastic bags. A 5p charge, you are making a precedent, you're making a principle. 5p on a plastic bag, it could be 10p. It's like the congestion charge, £5, it's now £11.50. You open that tax, it will grow and it will grow. And you open a level of government at world government, it will be permanent. You'll be stuck with it, and it will keep going, and you're going to have other things. And the worst thing of all is energy rationing. I don't know if you've heard about energy rationing. We've already had the Stern report saying we're going to get blackouts. What they'll be doing is, because all this renewable, so to speak, the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine when you need it at night and in the winter. So it's a complete waste of money. It's a waste of resources. It'll never work. So we're going to have energy rationing. What they're going to do, they have got a complete document saying after the carbon tax we're going to have energy rationing. It's called a carbon currency. Everyone will be given their own personal carbon credits. It's the same as the businesses have got now. We're going to get from business carbon credits to individual carbon credits, and they will expire after a year. Now, what happens if you need a certain amount of energy for a year and it's already spent? It'll be gone. Energy rationing. Smart meters. Smart meters have something called remote access. What does that mean? That as soon as you're using more energy than you're supposed to use, they will cut you off until your ration has been complete, and nobody will have any wealth because your money will last a year, and at the end of that year, if you haven't spent it, it's gone, it vanishes. And that's what we're looking at. If people believe all this nonsense and allow people to demonstrate outside Parliament for greater carbon taxes, they will end up with their old relative dying of cold, and they will end up with energy rationing, and we'll have power cuts. We'll end up with no personal transport. You know, the 20 mile an hour limits, they're now talking about 15 mile an hour limits on cycle roads. And if they say they'll do it, they'll probably do it. And also Paris is the first town in the world to ban cars over a certain age. Britain has got the low emission zone. All these vans, commercial vehicles, are banned from London now, even though they pass the MOT. So they now want to ban all cars in European cities by 2050. So, you know, the legislation is there, people need to know about it, and they need to know without global warming, would they really have accepted it? I don't think so.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that it's done on the back of this sort of cosy green agenda.
Yeah.
But this is real fascism,
Yeah,
in a true sense.
It's doing...
And we are talking about a communitarian system, which is basically the loss of all rights, including property, and I think that's a very important thing, because a lot of these people who are going into these areas of London now, they're saying, oh, the house prices, say, in Walthamstow are going up massively. Well, that's not a good thing at all.
Not at all.
It's a terrible thing. And also, if these people realise when they're doing their fake recycling, which it is,
a lot of it goes into landfill.
That it goes to landfill,
yeah.
Right? We know it's getting shipped off to China. This is mainstream news. But if they knew that basically the houses that they live in are going to be forfeited from them over very, very simple things. We've already seen this. We've seen forced evictions over a few £100s. This has obviously happened in America. It's happened on a massive scale here. So if people think that this green thing is good, and they're going to live in these communities that are going to be safe, and there's going to be no cars, well, they're going to have no houses either.
Yeah, and it all works by consent as well. So you've got a number of states in America, so it is a federal system, unlike Europe, which we don't know what it is now, because it's basically like the Soviet Union light. They've rejected Agenda 21. It's all by consent. If we don't like the EU, we can leave tomorrow. It's allowed. It's all by consent. So all these draconian measures that are happening are optional. It's up to us. No, nobody is in a prison. The door is open. We could walk through. So, yeah. And the other thing is that in America, I've heard that they are banning people growing their own food and collecting their own rainwater. Now, what is that a sign of? You know, the American Constitution. We don't have a written constitution in Britain. It's all what's allowed or what isn't allowed, and that can change from day to day. We've got the Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights, but you know, who uses that anymore? But in America, they've got a constitution. They are wiping a coach and horses through it. I mean, who says that you can't grow your own food in your own garden? That is sustainable. That's what the Greens want. So if the Greens want it, why are they banning it? You know,
that's
disconnect.
That's a very interesting point, because I say that to people who have been sort of co-opted into this green agenda, and they're really horrified when they hear that. But that's in the documents.
Yeah.
You're not, like, golf courses are not sustainable. We're on some kind of cricket pitch at the moment.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable. That's going to go.
Incredible.
There's going to be high density housing in the future. Flats. London's just going to be turned into a slave city. This is all in their documentation, and it's happening faster and faster. So what do you think we should do about it, David?
It's very simple. I mean, to quote one of my great teachers, David Icke, the truth shall set you free. It really is that simple. Government is by consent and not by diktat. Every human being on this planet is equal as a life. We're all different, so we shouldn't be equal as in all the same, but we're all equal as in equally valuable. You are no more important than me. The royal family are no more important than us. It's all by consent. So these people are supposed to be working for us. If we realise what they're doing and we simply say, we've had enough, we understand exactly what's happening now. You might have done it so slowly that the frog was being boiled, but the heat is now hot enough to know that we're being boiled. We're going to get out the saucepan. It's up to the people. It really is. They have the power. It's not difficult.
No, it's not. And non-compliance with a lot of this stuff, I think, is very important, because it's just basically being enforced by corporations with no real authority. In other words, no lawful authority.
Exactly.
You've got corporations now, they're just acting like land pirates. And that's really exactly, in a way, that the history of Britain has shown that's happened over hundreds of years, basically, that our rights have been completely eroded. But when it gets to an outside force like the United Nations, that they're dictating whatever comes down to the local authorities, people are probably now starting to see it. But they're still being co-opted into this thing where it's green and it's good. And that's what we need to break down.
Yeah.
So have you got any thoughts about how you can break that down when you explain things to people? How would you explain it when someone says, yeah, but surely it's a good thing not to have cars in cities?
Well, it's very simple, really, that no individual has the power over you. We have the power as groups. And you've just got to think about it practically. You know, would you really want your family not to be able to visit each other? Would you really not want to be able to go to work? Look at history, just use logic, say we've been doing this for 100 years, where's the harm in it? Who has got serious illnesses? We are now living something like 30% longer than we did before we had all this so-called pollution. So it doesn't make sense. You know, the sea levels have risen 7 inches in the last 100 years, and they have the right rate of rise. If it carries on at the current, it might even reach a foot after another 100 years. There's nothing physically happening. And why on earth would people want to remove their most basic rights and liberties over what is nothing more than faith in authority? Because all this nonsense about the scientists knowing better, the scientists know the details. When I did accounting for a year before I did law, we were taught in the first year how to get the identical figures and make them look different to show a bigger profit or a bigger loss, depending on if it was for the taxman or if it was for the customers. And it's so easy to fiddle the figures to create a different bottom line, but you can't keep it up forever.
We refuse to be told that this is going to be our end. We are not going to sign up for the program that they seem to have felt that they are designing for us. They are not going to do this to us. We are not going to allow it.
Welcome to Windows on the World with me, Mark Windows. Reports of your death were greatly exaggerated then.
As soon as I was going out the door, she says, "All right, Johnny Delirious, you go outside that door, you're a dead man."
Change from Richard and Judy for you.
I've come home.
Workfare isn't a job, Ian, okay? If you're listening, workfare isn't a job, it's slavery. So along with all the change agents implementing this, we've also got our own little change agent newspaper funded by the council called Waltham Forest Echo. And here's a quote from it. 30 million reasons for change. Oh, the word change again. Here we go, but they're not going to tell us what the change really is. Quote, while the council could only do a limited amount on its own, with up to 30 million funding, we really can make some radical differences, said Councillor Clyde Lokes. Now, Clyde Lokes is the king of eco-fascism in Waltham Forest. He was the man who brought in fines for people spitting in the street. Now, okay, that can be quite a disgusting thing to many people, but actually, in many cultures, the Chinese that find it very beneficial for health to actually spit things out. It's actually quite good for you. But this is just really about control. And this guy's been brought in to do just that. He says, I think Andrew Gilligan was impressed by our vision for cycling in the borough and also saw huge potential here. See, he's bringing in Andrew Gilligan there, who's quite an intelligent chap, who's now being labelled by Clyde Lokes as an eco-fascist cyclist. Okay, so here's another quote from a cycling group, and this guy, Paul Gasson, was in charge of Transition Towns, Walthamstow. Transition Towns is an Agenda 21 backed local initiative to get people to examine their carbon footprints, of course with no evidence that we need to reduce them, because the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, use models and projections. They do not use science, but we're told that the science is settled. Of course, it's again by consensus, because all this is about taxation, and now that every house has to have an energy performance certificate. Now this is a bit of nothing at the moment, but in the future your house is going to have to be checked and measured for this carbon footprint nonsense, and you will be hit with massive bills to make your house compatible. And this is already happening in California, as stated by Deborah Tavares on our show The Smart Green Genocide. Here's another lie from the propagandists. Survey after survey shows a majority of local residents want to cycle more, but won't because they're afraid of the traffic, said Paul Gasson, chair of Waltham Forest Cycling Campaign. The Mini Holland plans, if done properly, will let anyone from 8 to 80 ride in safety from their home in Walthamstow to most key local destinations and beyond. Now this is propagandised stuff again, because again we know that it's not about cycling, it's about getting people off the road in their cars and closing areas down so they're easier to control. So lots of local areas have already been mapped out for control and to be closed down. This is of course in case there's any civil unrest, so there is a bigger picture to all this which they're obviously not telling us. The Mini Holland plans should make cycling feel a lot safer, opening up cycling to more than just the dedicated. On top of that, cycling is already cheap, healthy and safe. You can pick up a bike for £100, you'll soon start saving compared to driving or using tube or bus. They're not taking into account again the self-employed. And I think someone has made a comment about this article. Really, yeah, what's White Van Man going to do? Well, White Van Man is actually the self-employed guy who comes around to your property and repairs it, maintains it, and builds your extension or puts your new windows in. So really, we're talking about wiping out the real self-employed. Walthamstow, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to show what can be done with genuine council commitment to deliver, said Paul Gasson. With that commitment, and assuming all of the details are carefully planned, it'll mean far fewer cars on the roads. Here, now they actually tell you what it's about at the end. Kids able to cycle to school as well as play out on their streets more safely. Far more people of all ages and abilities out on bikes, and healthier, happier residents all around. So the closing of all the roads locally, no self-employment, small businesses closing down, but plenty of green eco fascists who are employed by local authorities or central government. So it's those people who are going to benefit, not sovereign individuals or the self-employed, or people who actually really make a difference to their communities.
So what we've got here, basically, there's a list of words. Now there's two lists of words. I'll give you the plus words first so that we know what it's about. Warm and fuzzy. Use words which don't mean very much. Neologisms, carbon footprint, sustainable, green, smart energy. What you have to do is, it's like Chinese or French, you need to get all the words that they use in Agenda 21 for sustainable development. See, firstly, that there is a document which tells them to use these words, which 90% of them don't have a meaning, and convert them to what they really mean, which is about controlling us and reducing our rights.
Could you just tell us which document that is, David?
It's a PR document. I've got it on the internet. It's on understandingfraud.blogspot.co.uk. I've got all my stuff there, so that's the quickest way to do it. So if you look there, and it all links back to the originals. So it's something that the UN are using. It's basically what they train the people who are promoting Agenda 21 to use. So it's like you're doing hypnosis, because you were talking about NLP with me earlier, which I've studied as well. And the thing is that you've got a way of creating an illusion. Now the greatest example of how this works was by Penn and Teller, who are some of the best magicians in the world, and they are great libertarians, and they did a video on YouTube about how the global warming thing uses smoke and mirrors and misdirection. It's all misdirection. They've got a list of buzzwords that you must use, which if you boil them down they mean nothing. Now I'll give you an example. Wood chips, Drax power station, not the nuclear one but the coal power station. It's a lovely, powerful, it produces gigawatts of power. They have banned it under EU regulations, and they're using biofuel, which is called wood chips. They go to America, they get all the offcuts and all the rubbish from America, ship it over here. It has 50% of the power that the coal has, and it costs 6 times as much. That is an example of what our governments are doing to us, and they are telling you it's good. How can that be good? Now the other list of words, I'll give you an example just to see how it works in context. It's not about global warming as such, but it puts it into a Soviet style thought and mind control. 1984, Brave New World. It's all based, it wasn't fiction. When they wrote 1984, it was on his own observations of the way politics were going as fiction, so that people would think and they would be aware of it. The social workers have got a list of words like backward or retarded. They are not allowed to use. They will get the sack if they use that, and it's going through all the councils. Different councils have got words they can't use. It's all about controlling the mind and controlling the thoughts, and basically shutting off people's own ability to think for themselves. Because in the long run, what happens is we've all got logic. A child can add up. Now people say to me on the internet, you're not qualified as a scientist, shut the hell up. And I say, look, I'm not a scientist, I'm a lawyer. I'm taking expert advice, just like a minister, just like a politician who's not in education, in science, but they got expert advisors. I use the experts. These guys on the internet, Piers Corbyn and people like that, love talking to the public. They want to help us. So I go on Facebook, I go on Twitter, I say, what do you think of this? And they'll answer me within 5 minutes if they're around. So I've got these people helping me. And I've got the people on the other side helping me as well. I've spoken to people that are highly involved in global warming who've tried to teach me the science behind it, which is very useful. And then you see it's wrong. They're exploiting it. Now the whole point is that if you're a proofreader is trained to spot errors. When I was teaching, you would get mistakes in essays. I've never seen a mistake that's come through these guys that one pupil would ever do. They use induction, they extend from the specific. Any warm weather, it's global warming. If you say we've had 5 cold winters here, which is quite correct, it's weather. But they use the same things against us that we wouldn't even dream of using, or only in error. They use it the whole time. All the studies of global warming are either based in the distant future, this might happen, this is a model. Look at the models from 10 or 20 years ago. Did anything happen? No. How many climate refugees have we got? 0 climate refugees. Look at the evidence. Be a proofreader. We can all do that. It's that simple, and that will set us free.
Thanks for joining us on Windows on the World. Remember, keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World. We'll see you soon.